Welcome back. All right, talking about the Chicago Blackhawks now. Yep. So as we just passed the halfway mark in terms of this playlist and teams I'm talking about, the Chicago Blackhawks at the quarter century mark. An interesting team, much better in the playoffs than in the regular season, according to the power rankings that I did looking at the quarter century. So 23rd in the regular season because they've missed the playoffs a lot, but when they hit well. Third in the playoffs power rankings. Now, 3 Stanley Cups over that time period: 2010, 2013, and 2015. So 3 Stanley Cup wins in 6 years. Is there controversy around this organization? Absolutely, yes. And that's as far as we'll go into that here because honestly, it's been talked about plenty over the years. In this, we'll talk about their success on the ice, but definitely some controversy there. Now, on top of the 3 Stanley Cups they won, 2009 and 2014, they also went to the Stanley Cup Conference Finals, meaning 2013, 2014, and 2015, they were at the very least in the Final Four, and 2 of the 3 years they won the Stanley Cup. Their last Stanley Cup win, of course, being 2015. And it's probably going to be a while before this team is really and truly in the hunt for a playoff spot and a Stanley Cup win again. Picking up Bedard is a huge part of the future for them, but there's a lot more work to be done. Frank Nazar is coming along, and various other young players are coming along, but it's going to take a while before Chicago's really and truly a contender again. That being said, in terms of their on-ice success, I have to give this team an A. 3 Stanley Cup wins, they kind of have to get an A grade for what they've done from 2000-2001 through last season, 2023-2024. And, of course, this season wouldn't bring them down either because, again, they're in the rebuild and all that fun stuff. Now, when we look at their scoring leaders from January 1st of 2001, the millennium, all the way through until 2023-2024, the end of that regular season, Patrick Kane's the leading scorer because, of course, he is. 1,161 games played, 446 goals, 779 assists, 1,225 points. I checked. Those numbers are good. Taves, excellent numbers for Jonathan Taves. 1,067 games played, 372 goals, 511 assists, 883 points. Both of those players will be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. No questions asked. Keith might be in the Hall of Fame. Is he already in the Hall of Fame? Did he get in the Hall? Did he get in the Hall? Has he already got in the Hall? Anyways, 1,192. I don't know. What are years anymore? 1,192 games played by Keith, 105 goals, 520 assists, 625 points. There will be a lot of players from this era that will end up getting in the Hall of Fame. Sharp won't, but still, did he win a Stanley Cup or 2? Absolutely. 749 games played, 249 goals, 283 assists, 532 points. Brent Seabrook, 1,114 games played, 103 goals, 361 assists for 464 points. Marian Hossa, 534 games, 186 goals, 229 assists, 415 games. And this team did away with the meme. The meme was that wherever he goes, that team falls short in the Stanley Cup final, right? He was a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. They lost to Detroit. He goes to Detroit, and then Detroit lost to Pittsburgh in the final the year after. He goes to Chicago, and then he wins the Stanley Cup, ruining a good old-fashioned meme. DeBrincat, 360 games played, 160 goals, 147 assists, 307 points before he exited the team. Brandon Saad, 428 games played, 114 goals, 127 assists for 241 points. Kyle Calder, who didn't win the Calder Trophy, ironically. 351 games, 84 goals, 124 assists for 208 points. And Steve Sullivan, 260 games played, 78 goals, 127 assists, 205 points. All Sullivan did his entire career was put up points, and he bounced around the league a lot because he was smaller. So at least that seemed to be the case, that being a smaller player, he wasn't treated as seriously as others. It was an era where being bigger meant you were more highly coveted by a general manager. Now, goaltending, Corey Crawford is the story here. A record of 260, 162, and 53, 918 save percentage. Khabibulin, 91, 80, and 25, a 902 save percentage for Khabibulin. Jocelyn Thibault, a personal favorite of mine, 79, 75, and 22, 905 save percentage. Cristobal Huet, 46, 29, and 8, a 902 save percentage. What's interesting is Antti Niemi's not on the list. Won the Stanley Cup with Niemi in 2010. He's not on the list for wins. After that, of course, they had the the issue with the qualifying offers for the restricted free agents, and we end up with Niemi leaving and just this disaster of contracts that happened. But it is interesting that Niemi's not in the top 4. He did get a cup ring, though. So when we look at the coaches, there's been some coaches in Chicago's history, haven't there? So going back to 2000-2001, Alpo Suhonen. It is interesting to see that they have a European-trained coach currently, and that Alpo Suhonen and just the disastrous season that was had there was part of the reason, I think, why, at least this has been the theory, why we haven't seen as many European-born and trained coaches succeeding and getting at least a chance to succeed at the NHL level. But Suhonen had the 1 year. Then Brian Sutter takes over. Can't get more Canadian than a Sutter. Trent Yawney, Denny Savard was coach for a while there. And then Joel Quenneville had a nice long run as coach. Jeremy Colleton would take over after him. Then they went to Derek King briefly before Luke Richardson took over. And of course, this season, Anders Sorensen has got a chance behind the bench. And I'm rooting for Sorensen. I would love to see more European born and raised and trained coaches getting a chance at the NHL level. I think there's something different they can bring. There's obviously going to be some standard NHL coaching there, but there might be some differences to the way they coach things. And it might be entertaining to see, since there's so many European-born players in the NHL, why not coaches? I think that's a good trend. I hope that continues, and maybe Chicago can be ahead of it. Then you get to general managers. It's an interesting list. First off, Mike Smith. Then Bob Pulford, who was in NHL circles for many decades. Dale Talon, of course, general manager. Then Stan Bowman. And, of course, right now, the general manager being Kyle Davidson. I like Davidson. I think what gets me with Davidson is the fact that he really is sort of an any man, in that when there was that famous part where he was being interviewed. Wasn't it at the draft he was being interviewed, and whoever was interviewing him had no idea it was the general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks? He doesn't look like a general manager. He doesn't have that air about him. And I think as long as he keeps that, good. I think that's great. Davidson just comes across as a really good average guy that when I've talked about, if I ever had a chance to do interviews, Davidson would be a guy I'd love to talk to, because I think it'd be a fun interview and just a casual sort of, discussion of things. And it might be kind of fun to see what the plan is, that kind of thing, as if he's going to tell anybody the overall plan. Obviously, it's a rebuild, so the plan right now is more of a concept. But anyways, Kyle Davidson is general manager currently. Anders Sorensen is coach. I find myself rooting for them a little bit. And then you get to the captaincy. Tony Amonte, if we go back to 2000-2001 being the captain. Alexei Zhamnov, kind of forgotten from that era, but an excellent player in his own right. And then there was the season that Adrian Aucoin and Martin Lapointe were both captain of the team. Jonathan Toews, of course, would take over. It was Jonathan Toews who was captain for a very long time before Nick Foligno became captain of the team this season. You have to think he's keeping that sea warm for the next captain, who would have to be Bedard, right? Bedard's not quite there yet, but he's going to be the coach, and he's going to be the face of this team, I think, for a very long time. He will get it all figured out at the NHL level. I believe that. He is going to be a superstar. I think that the expectations on him might have been a little bit high when he committed to the NHL, but I also think right now there are some that maybe their expectations are a little bit lower than they should be. I think that he has an excellent future, and I think for the Chicago Blackhawks, the build has maybe been a little bit slower than they want. That's the reason why Luke Richardson is out of a job right now, and Sorensen was brought in, but they're trending in the right direction. There's a lot of good young players in this organization. They're going to be a ton of fun to watch. Vlasic and Crevier are going to be beasts on that blue line for them. And there are a lot of other good young players coming up and ready to play, or close to being ready to play for the big team. Next year could be a very interesting season for the Chicago Blackhawks, especially if, let's say, they won the draft lottery and got the number 1 pick, which everybody will have a very normal reaction to if that takes place. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below regarding Chicago. And the last quarter century for them, which again, I give them an A for, because 3 Stanley Cups, you kind of sort of have to. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.